Then we shall have an overall view of the critical approaches outlined in the IGNOU materials. So let's begin with the author. Let's begin with the author. It belongs to the Victorian age. So you already know the background of the Victorian age. So we are going to begin with the author. All of you can hear me? Yes, all of you can hear me? Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's continue. So Mary Ann Evans was born in 1819 and died in 1880. So who was this Mary Ann Evans? It was the original name of George Eliot. In fact, George Eliot was the pen name of the author. As a writer, she used the name George Eliot. Her real name was Mary Ann Evans. So she was an English novelist, poet, journalist, translator, and one of the leading writers of the Victorian era. She wrote 7 novels. The names are Adam Bede, which she published in 1859. Then The Meal on the Flush, 1860. Silas Marner, 1861. These are the dates of publications. Then Ramola, 1862-63. Then Felix Holt, the Radical. Felix Holt, the Radical in 1866 and Middlemarch in 1871-72. Middlemarch in 1871-72. And Daniel Deronda in 1876. Most of these novels are set in provincial England and are known for their realism and psychological insights. So these are the novels of George Eliot. Although the female authors were published under their own names during her lifetime, she wanted to escape the stereotype of women's writing being limited to light-hearted romances. She did not want to write light-hearted romances. She also wanted to have her fiction just separately from her already extensive and widely known work as an editor and critic. Another factor in her use of a pen name may have been a desire to shield her private life from public scrutiny because she was involved with a married man, thus avoiding the scandal that would have risen because of her relationship with the married George Henry Lewis. So there are 2 reasons why she chose a pen name, George Eliot, and it's a male name. Let's come to the novel Middlemarch. Middlemarch, subtitled A Study of Provincial Life. The subtitle is A Study of Provincial Life. It's a novel by George Eliot, as you know, appearing in 8 installments. It appeared in 8 installments, in 8 volumes, from 1871 to 1872. It is set in the 50-ish English Midland town from 1829 to 1832, and it follows a distinct and intersecting stories with many characters. And the issues include the status of women, the nature of marriage, idealism, self-interest, religion, hypocrisy, political reforms, and education. Despite the comic elements, Middlemarch uses realism to encompass historical events. And the 1832 reform of the early railways, the accession of King William IV. It also views the contemporary medicine and examines the reactionary views in a settled community facing unwelcome change. Eliot began writing the 2 pieces that would form the novel in 1869 and 1870 and completed it in 1871. So the initial reviews were mixed. Some phrases it, some were critical of it, but it is now seen widely as her best work and one of the great novels in English. So it was a sort of introduction to the novel. I want to tell something about the background because it did not begin as a novel. In fact, two stories were merged together. So Middlemarch originates in two unfinished pieces that Eliot worked on during 1869 and 1870. The novel Middlemarch is focused on the character of Lydgate, Lydgate, and the long story Miss Brooke, which focused on the character of Dorothea, Dorothea. By the spring of 1871, George Eliot had worked out a sketch for combining the two stories, and the ardent woman in whom Eliot saw the likeness of Saint Teresa had this in common with Lydgate in Middlemarch. So they were both visionaries, this Dorothea and Lydgate. The two different stories of Dorothea and Lydgate. They both were visionaries, gifted with a sense of vocation and service. She had realism enough to perceive that society did not always grant such people the opportunity to exercise their chosen roles. And in her art, however, George Eliot found the commonality of purpose and a useful linking device in the stories of Lydgate and Dorothea Brooke. So she mixed up the two stories and made it one, and the book was Middlemarch. Let's come to the story. As I told you, it's a long story with many characters. So first we will begin with the summary so that you will have an overall idea of the story. Then we will move to the critical approaches to it, or we will discuss the characters, themes, and other things. So I will tell you the story now. Be attentive and listen to me. Okay, don't be confused by the characters because in the middle I'll just summarize things and tell you the relations among characters. So Middlemarch centers on the lives of residents of Middlemarch. Middlemarch is as I told you, it's an imaginary Midland town from 1829 onwards. The setting is from 1829 onwards. So the novel is set in Middlemarch, which is an imaginary town, and it is set in 1829 onwards, the years preceding the 1832 Reform Act, which is an important historical event. The narrative is considered to consist 3 or 4 plots of unequal emphasis. First, the life of Dorothea Brooke, that is one plot, the life of Dorothea Brooke. Second, the career of Tortious Lydgate, the career of Tortious Lydgate. Then we have the courtship of Mary Gart by Fred Vincy. That is another story, the courtship of Mary Gart by Fred Vincy. And fourth, the disgrace of Nicholas Bulstrode. The story of Nicholas Bulstrode. All these stories have been merged together in Middlemarch. So the two main plots are those of Dorothea and Lydgate. The story of Dorothea and the story of Lydgate, which are related in that particular town. So the plot happens concurrently. All the Bulstrodes is centered in the later chapters. In the later chapters, there is an emphasis on the story of Bulstrode. So till now, you heard of the character of Dorothea Brooke, the character of Tertius Lydgate, Mary Gart and Fred Vincy, and Nicholas Bulstrode. Let me come to the story. So Dorothea Brooke is a 19-year-old girl living with her younger sister Celia. She is living with her younger sister Celia, Celia, under the guardianship of her uncle, Mr. Brooke. Her parents were dead. Dorothea Brooke's parents were dead, and she was living with her uncle and her younger sister. Dorothea is an especially pious young woman. She is the central character of the story, whose hobby involves the renovation of buildings belonging to the tenant farmers, though her uncle discouraged her. So she was idealistic by nature. Dorothea is quoted by Sir James Chatham. Sir James Chatham. So Sir James Chatham is a character, a young man close to her own age, but she remains oblivious to him. She did not respond to his advances. She is instead attracted to the Reverend Edward Casaubon, Casaubon, who is pitted against Dorothea. And that particular person, he is a clergyman, aged 45. And this girl is only 19-year-old. She was idealistic and she had developed a kind of love for this clergyman, Edward Casaubon, who is aged 45. And Dorothea accepts his offer of marriage despite her sister's misgivings. So Chatham is meanwhile encouraged to turn his attention to Celia, who has developed an interest in him. So till now the story is that Celia and Dorothea are two sisters who are living with their uncle Arthur Brooks, Mr. Brooks. I repeat, Dorothea and Celia are two sisters who are living with their uncle Mr. Brooke. Dorothea is idealistic by nature. She was courted by Sir James Chatham, but she was not interested in him. Rather, she was interested in a middle-aged person, Casaubon, who was a priest, a clergyman. Then Sir James Chatham shifted his attention towards Celia. So now Dorothea and Casaubon are married and Celia and James Chatham are married. Let's proceed with the story. Then we have two more characters, Fred and Rosamond Vincy. Fred Vincy and Rosamond Vincy are brother and sisters. They are the eldest children of the town's mayor. Having never finished university, Fred is widely considered to be a failure. Fred is considered to be a failure because he could not complete his study at the university. But he allows himself to post because he is the presumed heir or the successor of his childless uncle, Mr. Featherstone. Mr. Featherstone is another character. Mr. Featherstone is another character. And this with Mr. Featherstone was staying Mary Garth, Marigarth, another character. She was staying. She was a niece of Featherstone, and she was staying with him. And Fred is in love with her and wanted to marry her. So now some more characters are introduced. Fred and Rosamond Vincy are brother and sisters. They are the children of the town's mayor, or Middlemarch town mayor. Then Fred is in love with Mary Garth. Mary Garth was staying with her uncle, Mr. Featherstone, who was a rich person, and he was childless. Then let's come back to the story of Dorothea and Casaubon. So on their honeymoon in Rome, Dorothea and Casaubon experienced the first tension in their marriage. When Dorothea finds that her husband has no interest in involving her with his intellectual pursuit and he has no real intention to have his copious note published, because we know that Dorothea was attracted towards Casaubon because she was idealistic in nature. And she found that Casaubon was an intellectual. She thought that at least. And he was writing a key to all mythologies. Casaubon was writing a key to all mythologies. That's why she was impressed. But now she has come to realize that he had no intention of publishing those notes. She meets Will Ladislaw. Will Ladislaw is another character. Will Ladislaw, W-I-L-L, Will, L-A-D-I-S-L-A-W, Ladislaw, who is Casaubon's much younger cousin, whom he supports financially. Casaubon supports this cousin, Ladislaw, financially. And Ladislaw begins to feel attracted to Dorothea, though she remains oblivious, and the two become friendly. So on their honeymoon, there is estrangement, or the tension grew between Casaubon and Dorothea. And another person, Will Ladislaw, was there, who accompanied them or who was staying with them, and he was attracted towards Dorothea. Then Fred becomes deeply in debt. That Fred Vinci. Let's come back to Fred Vinci. Fred becomes deeply in debt. He had borrowed a lot. And he found himself unable to repay the money. Then he met Mary's father, that Mary girl's father, co-signed the debt. And they lost all their money for repaying the borrowing of the debt of Fred Vinci. So Mr. Garth warns Mary against ever marrying Fred, because Fred had borrowed, that Fred Vinci had borrowed, and he had made co-sign Mr. Garth, Mary's father, and they had to lose their money. Then Fred comes down with an illness and is cured by Tertius Lydgate. Tertius Lydgate is a doctor, okay, the newest doctor in Middlemarch. I told you in the beginning that the story of Dorothea and the story of Lydgate are merged in Middlemarch. So now Fred comes down with an illness and is cured by Mr. Tertius Lydgate, the newest doctor in Middlemarch. Lydgate has new ideas about medicine and sanitation, and he believes that doctors should prescribe, not themselves, or they should not dispense medicines. And he drew the criticism of the entire town. They could not believe or rely on his advanced ideas. Then he allies himself with Bulstrode. This Lydgate, the doctor, he allies himself, he made friendship with Bulstrode, a wealthy church-going landowner. Because Bulstrode wants to build a hospital and clinic that would follow Lydgate's philosophy. Despite the misgiving of Lydgate's friend, the Reverend Fairbrother warned him that Bulstrode was not the right kind of person. Then in the meantime, Lydgate became acquainted with Rosamond Vinci. I told you, Fred Vinci and Rosamond Vinci were brother and sisters. So while treating Fred Vinci, Lydgate becomes acquainted with Rosamond Vinci, the sister of Fred Vinci, okay, who was beautiful and well educated. But she was shallow and self-absorbed. Seeking to make a good mate, she decides to marry Lydgate, Rosamond Vinci, who comes from a wealthy family, and she uses Fred's illness or sickness as an opportunity to get close to the doctor. Lydgate initially views their relationship as pure flirtation. He thought that he flirted with her, and he wanted to back away from Rosamond. But in the end, they became engaged and they marry even. At roughly the same time, Casaubon returned from Rome and he suffered a heart attack, who is married to Dorothea. And Lydgate is brought in to attend to him, and that doctor informs Dorothea that the nature of Casaubon's illness and recovery is difficult to pronounce upon, that he may indeed live around 15 years if he takes it easy and ceases his studies, although it is equally possible that the disease may develop rapidly, in which case death would be sudden. So Casaubon is on the verge of death in a way. Meanwhile, as Fred recovers, Mr. Featherstone falls ill. On his deathbed, Mr. Featherstone reveals that he has two wills and he tries to get Mary to help him to destroy one, Mary Garth. Unwilling to be mixed up in the business, she refuses. She was a pure pious girl, a good girl. And Featherstone dies with two wills still intact. And Featherstone's plan had been for £10,000 to go to Fred Vinci. But his estate and fortune instead goes to an illegitimate son of his own, Joshua Riggs. Joshua Riggs is another character. And he got all the money of Featherstone, not this Fred Vinci, who wanted to or who expected to get the money or the inheritance of this Featherstone. So by chance, the illegitimate son, Joshua Riggs, got all the money. Then let's come back to the story of Casaubon, the clergyman who had married Dorothea. In poor health, Casaubon attempts to extract from Dorothea a promise that should he die, she will avoid doing what I should deprecate, he wrote, and apply yourself to do what I should desire, he wrote. He dies before she can reply, and she later learns of a provision in his will. Keshavan in his will wrote that if she marries Ladisla, she will lose her inheritance. So, Keshavan suspected Ladisla to have a relation with Dorothea. The peculiar nature of Keshavan's will for property, leads to the general suspicion that Ladisla and Dorothea are lovers, creating awkwardness between the two. It was natural. And Ladisla is secretly in love with Dorothea, we know that. But he keeps this to himself, having no desire to involve her in scandal or to cause her any disinheritance. So in the meantime, she realizes that she has romantic feelings for him, for Ladisla, but she must suppress them. He maintains or he remains in Middlemarch working as a newspaper editor for Mr. Brute Ladisla, who is mounting a campaign to run for parliament on a reform platform because it was the time of the reform bill. And Lidgett's effort to please Rosamond, let's come back to the other story, the story of Lidgett. His effort to please Rosamond soon leave him deeply in debt. He borrowed a lot, Lidgett, the doctor, to please his wife Rosamond. And he is forced to seek help from Bulstrode, that middle-aged rich man. Then we find the Vince's humiliation at being responsible for Caleb got financial setbacks and so many things. Let's leave those things. Then John Raffles is another mysterious character. Okay, John Raffles, Raffles, he's a mysterious man who knows of Bulstrode's shady past. He had knowledge of the past of Bulstrode, who is now happily married and living in Middlemarch. He appeared to blackmail him. His intention was to blackmail Bulstrode, who's John Raffles. So in his youth, the church-going Bulstrode engaged in questionable financial dealings, and his fortune is founded on his marriage to a much older, wealthy widow. And the widow's daughter, who should have inherited her mother's fortune, had run away. And Bulstrode located her, but did not disclose this to the widow, so that he, rather than the daughter, inherited the entire fortune, the money, the wealth. The widow's daughter had a son, and who turns out to be this Ladisla. So the Ladisla was the real successor of that fortune, of that wealth, which now Bulstrode possesses. After realizing their connection and feeling consumed with guilt, Bulstrode offers Ladisla a large sum of money, which Ladisla refuses because it is tainted, impure, polluted. And Bulstrode's terror of public exposure as a hypocrite leads him to hasten the death of the mortally sick Raffles. Raffles was sick and he hastened the death of that person, Bulstrode. While lending a large sum of money to Lidgett, he wanted it, whom Bulstrode had previously refused to bail out Lidgett of debt. Now he gave him the money. So however, the story of Bulstrode mistreat has already spread, and Bulstrode disgraced and gobs Lidgett because he had borrowed money from him. And people thought that he was also involved in the death of Raffles. So in the end, the disgraced and the reviled Bulstrode's only consolation is that his wife stands by him as he is to face his exile. He had to leave Middlemarch, Bulstrode. Also Lidgett and Rosamond, they had to leave Middlemarch. So this story is how Bulstrode's past became known, how Raffles died, and people thought that both Bulstrode and Lidgett, the doctor, were involved in it. So they had to leave Middlemarch, Bulstrode and Lidgett and his wife Rosamond. When Mr. Brooke's election campaign collapses, Ladisla decides to leave the town. Let's come back to the story of Dorothea and Ladisla. Now Keshavan is dead. And we know that Ladisla had romantic feelings for Dorothea Brooke. So he visits Dorothea to say his farewell, but Dorothea has also fallen in love with him, whom he had previously seen only as her husband's unfortunate relative. She renounces Keshavan's fortune, inheritance, and shocks her family by announcing that she will marry Ladislaw. At the same time, Fred, who has been successful in his new career, marries Mary. Fred Vincy was in love with Mary Gert, so now he has been successful in his new career and he married Mary Gert. So the finale details the eventual fortunes of the main characters. Fred and Mary, they marry and live contentedly with their 3 sons. In the finale, the story's endings are told. The Lydgate operates a successful practice outside Middlemarch and attempts a good income. Okay, I'll stop in just 2 more sentences to complete the story. And attends a good income, but he never finds fulfillment and died at the age of 50. Lydgate died at the age of 50, leaving Rosamond and 4 children. After he dies, Rosamond marries a wealthy physician, and Ladislaw engages in politics and public reform. And Dorothea, he marries Dorothea, and Dorothea is content, satisfied as a wife and a mother to their 2 children. Their son eventually inherits Brooke's estate. So this is
Hello,
the
ma'am.
story of Middlemarch.
Hello.
Yes, yes,
Excuse me, ma'am. Dorothea is a male
yes.
person or female person?
Female person,
And
female. She is the heroine of the
Ladislaw?
story.
And
Ladislaw
Ladislaw?
is a person. He's a man. He's a man.
Male.
He's a cousin of Keshu. Yes, male. Let
So,
me tell you the relation. Yes, tell.
yes. And uh, I am thinking his name is like a Ladislaw, like that. So,
No, no,
I am
no.
confusing.
No, listen, I'll tell you the relations again. Dorothea is a girl, Celia is a girl. Okay. They are 2 sisters. Dorothea and Celia are 2 sisters. They are staying or living with their uncle, Mr. Brooke. Okay, Mr. Brooke. Then Dorothea was idealistic by nature. She had high ideals. She was helping the nearby unfortunate people. Okay. So she developed a kind of infatuation, a love for this person, Kashuban. Okay. Kashuban. Edward Kashuban, who was a clergyman, okay, who was a 45 years old man. Okay. And Dorothea was only 19. So she married this clergyman. And Sir James Chatham was of Dorothea's age. He was also a wealthy person. He wanted to marry Dorothea, but Dorothea had no feelings for that person. Dorothea preferred to marry this Keshavan. So her sister Celia married Sir James Chatham. So the 2 sisters are married now. Dorothea to Keshavan, Celia Brooke to Sir James Chatham. Then we have another story of 2 brothers, the brother and sisters, Fred Vincy and Rosamond Vincy. Okay, Fred Vincy and Rosamond Vincy. Fred Vincy was in love with Mary Gert. Mary Gert. And Rosamond Vincy, I told you that George Eliot mixed 2 stories. The story of Dorothea, she started 2 different stories. She was writing 2 different stories, one on Dorothea Brooke and another on Lydgate. So now this Lydgate, who is a doctor, he had come to Middlemarch to settle there. So this Rosamond Vincy, Fred was ill. Fred Vincy was ill, sick. So this doctor came to treat him. The doctor came to treat Fred Vincy. And the sister Rosamond Vincy fell in love with Lydgate. Initially, both of them flirted with each other. They were not really in love. But in the end, they became engaged and they married each other. Rosamond Vincy and Lydgate, they married each other. But when we see all these marriages, these were not successful marriages. We find that during their honeymoon, this Dorothea and Keshavan, they developed misunderstanding for each other. Dorothea found out that, in fact, Keshavan was not a real scholar. because earlier she thought that he was a scholar, he was writing key to all mythologies. That's why she was impressed and agreed to marry him. Now she was disillusioned. And Kashyapa thought that Dorothea was in love with his cousin, Ladislaw, a male person. Okay, cousin, okay, his brother, Ladislaw. Okay. So Ladislaw had inclination, love for Dorothea, but he did not confess. He did not confess. Then the story moves forward. It is also integrated to the story of Bulstrode, another wealthy person from Middlemarch, who had a past. And a person named John Raffles knew his shady past, and he came to Middlemarch to blackmail him. In the end of the story, it came out that the person just hastened the process of his death. The Raffles' death was hastened by Bulstrode. And because Lydgate, the doctor, had borrowed from Bulstrode, people thought that both were implicated in the death of this Raffles. So both Lydgate and Bulstrode had to leave Middlemarch. They had to leave the town. Then in the end, we find that this Ladislaw came to say goodbye to Dorothea. Okay. But Dorothea confessed that she was also in love with him. And he rejected the property of Cassiubon in favor of this Ladislaw. She preferred to marry Ladislaw rather than inherit the property of Cassiubon. So when you read the finale of the novel, there is a chapter called Finale in that particular novel, Middlemarch, where we find all the conclusions. How Fred Vincy and Mary they are married to each other and they live content satisfactorily with their 3 sons. Then how Lydgate operates a successful practice outside Middlemarch because he had to leave Middlemarch and he had a good practice as a doctor and he attained a good income. But he died at the age of 50, leaving Rosamond and 4 children. And after his death, his wife Rosamond married again to a wealthy physician. Then we also came to know that Ladislaw is married to Dorothea and they have 2 children. And Dorothea had to abandon, to leave her idealism because she is now content as a wife only. So this is the story. I hope you got the story. It has a lot of characters and I left some characters so that you will understand the story. I thought you have got a rough idea of the whole story. So Middlemarch has been called a historical novel. So the action of Middlemarch takes place between 1829 and 1832, or 40 years prior to its publication. A date in time not so pronounced for it to be labeled as a historical novel. But we find many historical elements here. You don't get such questions. So about the context, just let's leave all this because let me check the time. Yes, we still have much time. So, though Judge Eliot was born and named Mary Ann Evans, she chose to write her novels under a male pseudonym. That is something interesting. She wrote under a male pseudonym, male false name, Judge Eliot. One would not know that she was a lady. So that was a false name. Her real name was Mary Ann Evans. She scorned the stereotypical female novelist. Rather than writing the silly, unrealistic romantic tales expected of women writers of the time, she wrote according to her own taste. And Middlemarch is a novel of epic proportion, but it transformed the notion of an epic. The epics usually narrate the tale of one important hero who experiences grand adventure, and they usually interpret events according to their grand design of fate. But Middlemarch's subtitle, the subtitle is A Study of Provincial Life, a study of provincial life. This means that Middlemarch represents the lives of ordinary people, not the grand adventures of princes and kings. And Middlemarch represents the spirit of 19th century England through the unknown, historically unremarkable common people of a small Midland town. And when we see the context, England was in the process of rapid industrialization. Social mobility was growing rapidly. And with the rise of merchant middle class, people like Bulstrode, one's birth no longer necessarily determined one's social status or social class for life. Moreover, there was no single coherent religious order or evangelical, Protestant and Catholics and Anglicans, they lived side by side. As a result, religious conflicts abound in the novel, particularly those centering on the rise of evangelical Protestantism, primarily middle-class religion that created heated controversy during the time. So all the context, the background of Victorian England has been reflected in this particular novel. Okay. We find a glimpse of the social life of the time in a provincial town, a faithful delineation. Then Middlemarch readers will be astonished by the novel's amazingly complex social world. And Eliot continually uses the metaphor of a wave. She has used the metaphor of a wave also in the finale to describe the town's social relations. And it is significant that no one occupies the center of the novel. It's not that one is a hero and another is a heroine here. There are so many characters and their lives are interweaved, interconnected. Middlemarch social relations are indeed like a wave, W-E-B, but the wave has no center. So this is the story. So the first story, we find the story of Dorothea, Cassiopeion and Ladislaw. Then the second story we find of, just a second please. Okay. The second story we find of Lydgate, okay, the Dr. Lydgate and Rosamond Vincy. And the third story is of Bulstrode. And all the three stories are integrated in Middlemarch. So about the review of the story, the reception of the story, while male critics castigated, criticized the bold and daring narrative as too gloomy for a woman writer, novelists like Virginia Woolf called it one of the few English novels written for grown-up people. It was the comment of Virginia Woolf that it was one of the few novels written for grown-up people. The two major choices govern the narrative of Middlemarch. Remember, one is marriage and another is vocation. When we read the story, we find that marriage, unsuccessful marriages, or even successful marriages. Okay. And another is vocation, the emphasis on vocation. These two things or themes predominate. Okay. Eliot also illustrates the consequences of making the wrong choices, both in marriages and in professions. Okay. While reading, we find these two are important things. Okay. Let's come to the questions of the previous years. There was a question, do you agree that characters like Lydgate and Rosamond are characters without real choices in Middlemarch? I repeat the question, do you agree that characters like Lydgate and Rosamond, who are married to each other, are characters without real choice in Middlemarch? The next, discuss some of the role of money in the relationship of Lydgate and Rosamond. Then write briefly on the social and gender concern in Middlemarch. social and gender concern themes. Like social, a reflection of her time, and gender, women seldom had opportunity. They discuss the main themes present in Middlemarch. Next, discuss the women's questions as illustrated in Middlemarch. And in the context, both the prelude and the finale are important. When you are told to sketch the character of Dorothea, or you are told to deal with the women's question, you have to quote certain passages from the prelude and the finale. This is very important. Then bring out the reasons for Dorothea's attraction for Cassiopeian. For Cassiopeian. What is your opinion of Dorothea? Why Dorothea was attracted towards Cassiopeian? Because she believed that he was an intellectual, writing key to all mythologies, would support her intellectually. They would grow together professionally. But it was not the case. She was disillusioned after the marriage. They discuss George Eliot as a social critique in Middlemarch. Then would you agree with the description of Will Ladisler in Middlemarch as the angel of light? Angel of light is a phrase that has been used in your IGNOU material. Okay. When you read the different characters, we get a caption for each character. So, Will Ladisler has been described as the angel of light. The answer you will get in the IGNOU material. Give your assessment of Cassiopeian's character in Middlemarch. The character sketch of Cassiopeian. Then analyze the significance of Cassiopeian-Dorothea relationship in the novel Middlemarch. Cassiopeian and Dorothea's relationship. Another question is on discuss how George Eliot constructs a wave-like overlapping between the domestic front and the public sphere. How the public and private they merge together in Middlemarch. Then attempt a character sketch of Dorothea in Middlemarch. A character sketch of Dorothea in Middlemarch. Examine the role of money in the novel Middlemarch. Then you have conflicting attitude to money. Determine the relationship between Lidgard and Rosamond in Middlemarch. Because Lidgard had inclination for the profession. In the medical profession, he wanted to do something better, something new. But Rosamond had more love for money, and she had a very expensive lifestyle, due to which Lidgard fell in debt. He had to borrow, and that's why he was ruined in the end. Then comment on the portrayal of women in Middlemarch. Then how does George Eliot depict society in transition, in change in Middlemarch? How there was change in profession, how there was reform in society. Okay, what was the changing attitude towards medical professions? So we find when we analyze the questions of the previous years, we find that many questions are on the characters and many are on themes. But we find that the characters are integrally related to the themes also. They can't be read in isolation from each other. So when you read the novel, you'll find that the characters and themes are interconnected. Let's begin with the characters. When we will read the character, you will get the story again. Okay, you will not forget the story. For example, let's start with Dorothea Brooke. Okay, Dorothea Brooke can be called the heroine of the piece, the story. She is an intelligent, wealthy woman with great aspirations. And she avoids displaying her wealth, and she embarks upon the projects such as redesigning cottages for her uncle's tenants for poor people. She marries the elderly Reverend Edward Cassiopeian with the idealistic idea of helping him with his research project, The Key to All Mythologies. However, the marriage was a mistake, as Cassiopeian does not take her seriously and resents her youth, enthusiasm and energy. Her request to assist him made it harder for him to conceal that his research is years out of date. What he was doing was just out of date. And because of Keshavan's coldness on their honeymoon, Dorothea becomes friends with his relative Will Ladisla, and some years after we know that Keshavan is dead, and this Ladisla fall in love, means Dorothea falls in love with Ladisla and marries him. Then the character of Lydgate. The character of Lydgate, the doctor. He was an idealistic, talented but naive young doctor. He was also idealistic like Dorothea. The two stories were similar because Dorothea was idealistic in nature and also Lydgate was idealistic in nature. Though he was a good poet, he was relatively poor. And Lydgate hopes to make great advances in medicine through his research, but he ends up in an unhappy marriage to Rosamond Vincy. And his attempt to show he is not answerable to any man fail, and he eventually has to leave the town of Middlemarch, sacrificing all his high ideals to please his wife. So this is Lydgate. Then Keshavan was a selfish elderly clergyman obsessed with his scholarly research, though that scholarly research was out of date. And his unfinished book, The Key to All Mythologies, was intended to be a monument, a great work. But we know that it was just out of date. People had already done research on the subject. And he's aware of this, but he will not admit it to anyone. Then we have Mary Girth. Just a second. Mary Girth. So Mary Girth is a plain and kind daughter of Caleb and Susan Girth. The Mary Girth was a daughter of Caleb and Susan Girth, and she works as Mr. Featherstone's nurse. She and Fred Vincy were childhood sweethearts. So Fred Vincy was in love with Mary Girth, but she will not let him to woo her until she shows himself willing and able to live seriously, practically, and sincerely. He wanted to be a clergyman, but Mary motivated, encouraged him to choose a profession of his own choice. And in the end, he was successful. This Fred Vincy. And Fred Vincy and Mary Girth, they married. So it was a successful marriage. Against the unsuccessful marriage of Dorothea Brooke and Keshavan, another was Lydgate and Rosamond Vincy. Then Arthur Brooke was the uncle. Then we have other characters like Celia Brooke, who was a sister of Dorothea Brooke, who was a beauty and who was more sensible and practical. So she chose to marry Sir James Chatham, who was a young man of good fortune. Then Sir James Chatham was the person whom Celia married. Then we have Rosamond Vincy, the wife of Lydgate, who was very beautiful and shallow, and she had a very high opinion of herself. And due to her luxurious lifestyle, Lydgate fell in debt. He borrowed a lot and he is ruined. Then we have Fred Vincy, Will Ladisla. Will Ladisla is the cousin of Mr. Keshavan, and Dorothea in the end of the story married this person. We have a lot of other characters like Walter Vincy, Lucy Vincy, Caleb Girth. We have Nicholas Bulstrode, who was a wealthy banker married to Mr. Vincy's sister Harriet. And he's a pious Methodist who seems to be a pious Methodist, but it came out that he had a shady past. Then we have Mr. Featherstone, so many other characters. So as I told you earlier, you make a relationship graph of the characters, who is related to whom and how the three other stories, they merge together. The different plots, they merge together to form one story, and how the characters are interlinked. And in this book, in your IGNOU material, you should read the characters from the IGNOU material. You have a whole chapter unit on it. Then when we come to themes, The first theme is it's a study of provincial life. In fact, it's the subtitle of your novel. It's the subtitle of Middlemarch, a study of provincial life. Eliot's novel is set in the fictional town of Middlemarch and described as being the silk-ribbon manufacturing town. And this subtitle of the novel has been viewed as significant. In fact, Matthew Arnold in his book Culture and Anarchy, Matthew Arnold in his book Culture and Anarchy, he classifies British society in terms of the barbarians. He has made certain divisions of British society. The first is barbarians, under which comes the aristocrats and the landed gentry. Then the Philistines, the urban middle class. Philistines, the urban middle class, and populace, the working class. And Middlemarch is a portrait of Philistine provincialism, a study of urban middle class in a provincial town. Then the women question. You had a question in previous year's exam that how Middlemarch has dealt with the women's question. I told you that for that you have to read the prelude and the finale to find how due to inadequate opportunity women were not able to realize their dreams. When we see the prelude, the beginning of the novel, just I want to quote certain lines. The first few lines, who that cares much to know the history of men and how the mysterious mixture behaves under the varying experiment of time, has not dwelt at least briefly on the life of Saint Teresa. The Saint Teresa, Dorothea has been compared to Saint Teresa, has not smiled with some gentleness at the thought of the little girl walking forth one morning hand in hand with her still smaller brother to go and seek martyrdom in the country of the Moors. A reference to Dorothea, and she has been compared to Saint Teresa. There is a significant line in the second paragraph towards the end, and for this letter-born Teresa were held by no coherent social faith and order which would perform the function of knowledge for the ardently willingful soul. Before that, the Spanish woman who lived 300 years ago, this Saint Teresa, was certainly not the last of her kind. She was able to realize her dream, this Saint Teresa. But many Teresas have been born who found for themselves no epic life, wherein there was a constant unfolding of the far resonant accent, perhaps only of a life of mistakes, like Dorothea's watch, and the offspring of a certain spiritual grandeur enmeshed with the meanness of opportunity. This line is significant. The offspring of a certain spiritual grandeur ill-mixed with the meanness of opportunity. Dorothea was a victim to that. She had spiritual grandeur, she believed in idealism, but it was ill-mixed with meanness of opportunity. Perhaps a tragic failure. She was a tragic failure in that way. So when you talk of the women's question, you have to mention this Saint Teresa and how many women who could not realize their dream, who could not make their dream true, like Dorothea. So Eliot has also criticized the ending of the novel here because Dorothea in the end married Ladislaw. Okay. Dorothea marrying a man with Ladislaw is so clearly her inferior. We don't find it satisfactory when we see the ending of the novel. When Dorothea married Ladislaw, Dorothea is a much grander character than this Ladislaw. It was like marrying her inferior. Then when we speak of themes, marriage is a theme. Marriage is one of the major themes in Middlemarch, and both principal plots that of Dorothea and Lydgate are case studies of unsuccessful marriages. Both of them, they married unsuccessfully, while there are many other marriages which were successful, like Fred Vince's to Mary Gurd or Celia Brooke to Sir James Chatham. We shall read more on the themes from IGNOU materials, because there you get an elaborate treatment of themes. It is well written. You follow that from IGNOU material, themes of Middlemarch. Then the motifs. We talked of motifs in case of earlier novels also, other novels also, the recurring features in a literary work. The recurring features in a literary work. Then what are the motifs used in Middlemarch? Motifs, M-O-T-I-F-S. First is epigraphs. Epigraphs. Each chapter begins with a small quotation or a few lines of words known as epigraph. When you turn the pages of Middlemarch, the novel, you will find that each chapter begins with an epigraph. And these epigraphs work as a way of summarizing the following chapter and moving the plot forward. They also work to place Middlemarch into a large canon of literary works, as Eliot chooses quotes from a variety of writers such as Shakespeare, Dante, Chaucer, and William Blake. Eliot was charged with being too intellectual for a woman author, in part because of the learned nature of her chosen quotation. In fact, when you read Middlemarch or any other novel by George Eliot and you don't see the name of the author, you will find or you will think that it is by a male author. She has not dealt with the frivolous, the silly things or romantic love stories. She has dealt with intellectual things. Then also as a motive we find gossip and speaking for others. Often characters, especially the characters of opposite genders, they don't communicate to each other directly. Instead, using their other characters to speak on their behalf. They use other characters to speak on their behalf. And gossip, another form of speaking for another person, plays an important part in the novel, as it is often how information is conveyed. We also find another thing as a motif here, debt and borrowing. Borrowing money. Who are the people who borrow? Tell me. Yes. Can you
Dr.
tell?
Apius
Yes. Dr. Lydgate.
and Fred.
Yes, Dr. Lydgate. And initially Fred Vinci also. He borrowed. So borrowing and debt. Debt appears throughout Middlemarch and money often indicates the elements of a character's personality. Plot is driven by characters worrying about money or asking others for money. We find a lot of it. Then Fred Vinci must ask several people for loans, and Lydgate incurs serious debt due to his failure to manage money and his wife Rosamond's cultured or luxurious taste. And Rufus' constant begging and blackmailing for money. Okay. Rufus blackmailed Bulstrode for money. On the other hand, Mary Garth's refusal to take money from the dying Featherstone proves her good, honest nature. He wanted to give Mary Garth money, but she did not take it. She refused to take it. So the exchange of money and the passing of debt ties the characters together in an economic context. So this was something about the motives used in Middlemarch. Let's come to the IGNOU material. Have you got it, all of you? You can use it for the exam. It is well written. In Unit 1, we have context to the novel, so approaching the novel. Approaching the novel. Middlemarch is undoubtedly a richly textured novel which has also gathered a staggering variety of critical opinions over time. And fortunately, it is an eminently readable novel, as you will discover, filled with lively characters, events, and dialogues. While the author directs the novel through a careful structuring, she also leaves sufficient room for the readers to exercise their interpretive choices. So it addresses the broad questions like why does the novel attract so much admiration as well as criticism? And then second, to what extent does Middlemarch belong to history and still escape the constraint of time? Then third, how effectively is the women's questions delineated in the exploration of gender relations presented in the novel? And finally, how does the structure contribute to the complexity of the issues, themes, and ideologies debated in the novels? These are the things with which your IGNOU materials deal with. So in Unit 1, approaching the novel, we get something about the context. Here you will find about the life and works of George Eliot. The life and works of George Eliot you will find here. There is also an analysis of the prelude, that Saint Teresa and the Miss Brooke or Dorothea Brooke theme. How the life of Saint Teresa is related to the life of Dorothea. In fact, when we read the prelude, then we read the story, we find the character of Dorothea is something sublime, idealistic. It makes a good picture of the Dorothea because she has been compared to Saint Teresa, and we see that she did not find opportunity to realize her dream. Then life and works of this has been dealt with in Unit 1. When you see the Unit 2 of IGNOU material, there we find themes, characters, and techniques. Themes, characters, and techniques. So what are the themes? Number 1, the theme of vocation. The theme of vocation, profession. So it is mainly illustrated by Dorothea Brooke and Lydgate, but has vital connections to Kashepan's fad intellectualism and Bulstrode's success, or Fairbrothers' precarious ministry, and Marigold's caregiving. So theme of vocation is one which we find in Middlemarch. Then second is marital compatibility. How there are so many failed marriages, and also we find some successful marriages. Third is money and pecuniary interest. As I told you, money and pecuniary interest are further determining factors. Unlike Henry James, or George Eliot gives cold facts about the wealth moderates personality. Wealth has an impact on personality. Then birth, rank, and class. Birth, rank, and class are important. They strongly divisive. The strongly divisive as factors, even in so small a society and as Middlemarch. We find people are divided according to their birth, rank, and class. As Dorothea and Ladislas union is forbidden by the violation of a code of propriety, and the other subtle form of social layerings are seen in instances relating to the Girth and Vincy families. So birth, rank, and class are important in Middlemarch too. The next theme is politics. Politics. Politics features nowhere directly in Middlemarch. However, the constant references to the Reform Bill bringing the politics of social change directly into the novel. And briefly, the reference is to the British Parliamentary Commons, the British Parliamentary Bills, that bill which becomes out in 1932. And it expanded the electorate for the House of Commons. So we have references to politics, but not directly in Middlemarch. Then also science. System of knowledge, both old and new, are contested, debated, especially in the realm of scientific discoveries in medicine. Lydgate, the doctor with new knowledge of medicine, came to the provincial town of Middlemarch, and how he is reciprocated, received, responded. Lydgate, who is the outsider and the cosmopolitan, is welcomed into the town for his skill required or acquired in Europe. But later he suspected of moral degradation, and people thought that he had a hand in the death of Raffles. The next theme is of religion. George Eliot rebelled against the orthodoxy in all institutions, especially in the church. As a young woman of 23, she had declared to her father that she would not attend church. But 4 years after this episode, Church Eliot, Mary Ann Evans published anonymously The Life of Jesus Christ Critically Examined. She had also published something called The Life of Jesus Christ Critically Examined. And given this background, we find it is a surprise that theology is not openly debated in Middlemarch. It has not been, or religion has not been openly debated in Middlemarch, though we find several characters are functionaries of the church. They work in the church, like Cassius is a churchman, or initially that boy, Fred Vinci, he wanted to be a priest. So there are several functionaries of the church. We find they are the characters of Middlemarch. Then egotism. Egotism is another theme. How Rosamund, Lydgate, and Dorothea, how egotism motivates their action. How egotism, the I, motivates the actions of Dorothea, Lydgate, and Rosamund. They're clinging to a vision entirely their own to a point of obsessive dedication. Is a form of self-centeredness which fails to see at times a dialectical relation between the individual and the society. They are victims of egotism in the sense that they are attached to a particular ideal obsessively. And it's a kind of self-centeredness. Did you understand what is the meaning of that? Egotism, when Dorothea has too much of idealism and she pursued it without paying attention to the view of the society or relations, or when Lydgate pursues an ideal, Rosamund's obsession with money or a good lifestyle. So these are also forms of self-centeredness which fail to see a dialectical relation between an individual and the society. Then we get description of the characters in the same unit. In the same unit, unit 2, characters, the prime of Miss Brooke. So it is a character sketch of whom? Tell me. Yes? Yes, tell me. The prime of Miss Brooke. Here we find a character sketch of
Dorothea Brooke.
very good, Dorothea Brooke. Then second, the unsuitable suitor. Who is the unsuitable suitor? Who approached a lady and married her, though he was not worthy of her?
Casaubon.
Very good, very good. Next, we have the outsider. Who is the outsider to Middlemarch, who came with an ideal and settled there? A doctor.
Lydgate.
Very good, Dr. Lydgate. Then the angel of light. Who was the angel of light in Dorothea's life? After Casaubon died and all that, who became the angel of light in her life?
Ladislaw.
Yes?
Ladislaw.
Yes? Very good, Ladislaw, very good. Then a matter of money. Who betrayed people for a love of money and became rich? Towards the end, he is exposed and he had to leave Middlemarch.
That is Nicholas Bulstrode.
Very good. Bulstrode. Very good. Okay. Then you have something called recalling Plato. How Middlemarch recalls Plato. Plato, as we know in his Poetics, he wrote of imitation. How drama or poetic works are imitation, mimesis. He also talked of diegesis. Diegesis. So here these two terms have been mentioned. Lodge, David Lodge, a critique attached Plato's term mimesis and diegesis to the novel, Diegesis, to the novel. And he said that mimesis is narrating by imitating another's speech. Mimesis means an imitation of another's speech. Whereas diegesis is narrating in one's own voice. Narrating in one's own voice is diegesis. And strictly speaking, only drama would be diegesis, because in drama, one speaks for himself or herself. So a novel which combines direct speech and also reportage of authorial commentary uses mimesis as well as diegesis. In that way, Middlemarch uses dialogue and also description. Dialogue for diegesis and description for mimesis in order to build up the story. So recalling Plato in Middlemarch, it uses both diegesis and mimesis. Then Unit 3. Unit 3. Philosophical underpinnings. How different ideologies are voiced in Middlemarch. In the beginning you find something like waiting and watching, hidden subject, a rattle in the throat, youth and merit, a sudden proposal, or love that has no name, all these. And all these have been dealt with one by one. Three gentlemen thinkers and a lady. So all these has been dealt with one by one. Let's leave with the philosophical underpinning. You get a lot, you go through this unit 2 thoroughly, because here you get themes and characters both. You will find it useful while preparing your answers, because here you get all the characters and the themes. Then Unit 4 is George Eliot's perspectives, views, opinions, different ways of looking at things, conflicts in ideologies. The community as moral voice. Then George Eliot and the women's question, using the Gothic, a critical change. All these things have been dealt with in Unit 4. Here we find Terry Eagleton's important essay, George Eliot, Ideology and Literary Form. And he charges that the author diffuses and depresses the potential tragic collision between the corporate and the individualistic ideologies. And Eliot is aware of the conflict. When she used different ideologies, or she saw different ideologies in conflict with each other in Middlemarch, she was aware of it. And the unresolved confusion of values add to the richness of the novel. Further, you have been given the information in this particular unit on contemporary debates relating to the women's question, which we already discussed. The women's question, when you answer, you write about the aspirations of Dorothea Brooke and how those were thwarted because of the time. Then we have, women's questions. And this, though she was with the live issues of her time, George Eliot weighed her responses very carefully. And through the destiny of Dorothea, key concept about education, inheritance enter the novel. We also find things about, or during the time, how education was dealt with. Education for men, women. We get a glimpse of the time, the inheritance laws, how those privileged men only, even now also, though we have laws, still in case of inheritance, men are always privileged. In addition, a clever juxtaposition of polyphonous, many voices in the community create an alternative set of arguments. And as the novel moves towards denouement or not a resolution properly, because we are not satisfied with the ending, George Eliot uses some structural devices such as Gothic to bring about a connectedness in the details of the plot. Mostly the elements of Gothic we will find the way she deals with the story of Bulstrode. Then finally in Unit 5, the finale, the title is the finale, and here you find things like the firm, money, politics, family, domesticity, community, or business enterprise, scientific innovations, how these things have been dealt with in Middlemarch. While reading the novel is available on the net. You must download it and read it. It's a very long novel. First, you read the elaborate summary of the novel because you have to save time. You have limited time. That's why first download the summary, read it, get a list of the characters, then read the novel. There will be no second reading. You will not require a second reading because you have to manage time. You have so many novels prescribed for you, and all of them are, or most of them are bulky. So while reading Middlemarch, you must read the beginning, the prelude, and the finale. And you can quote things from the prelude and the finale. Prelude, as I told you, you have to quote from the beginning of paragraph 2. Like, perhaps only a life of mistake, the offspring of certain spiritual grandeur, ill-meshed with the meanness of opportunity. That thing you have to quote while you write about Dorothea Brooke. And in finale also, we have certain significant lines. Though in the finale, we get a kind of conclusion to the life of all the characters, who is married to whom, and how they are living now. Still, in the beginning, we have certain lines like, I'm reading the beginning of the finale. Every limit is a beginning as well as an ending. Who can quit young lives after being long in company with them and not desire to know what befell them in their after years? Okay. So here we find the after years of the character, ending to the story. But here, some set out like crusaders of old with a glorious equipment of hope and enthusiasm and get broken by the way, wanting patience with each other and the world. So their dreams are thwarted, broken, and they have to find peace with the world, and they have to keep patience. Then towards the end of the finale, okay, we have two paragraphs which are significant. Certainly, those determining acts of her life were not ideally beautiful, of Dorothea's life. They were the mixed result of young and noble impulse, struggling amidst the condition of an imperfect social state, in which great feelings will often take the aspect of error, and the great faith the aspect of illusion. For there is no creature whose inward being is so strong that it is not greatly determined by what lies outside it. We are often influenced by the outside, by the world, by the society. A new Teresa will hardly have the opportunity of reforming a conventual life any more than a new Antigone will spend her heroic piety in daring all for the sake of a brother's burial. So Antigone has been mentioned here. But we insignificant people with our daily works and arts are preparing the lives of many Dorotheas, some of which may present a far sadder sacrifice than that of the Dorothea whose story we know. At least we found that she settled quite well, but still we find there are Dorotheas who meet a sadder ending to their story. And the final lines are, for the growing good of the world is partly dependent on historic arts. And that brings and the things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been. Is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life, and the rest is on visited tombs. So the growing good of the world is partly dependent on historic art, not always on big men. The things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been. It is owing to the number of people who faithfully live a hidden life, not well known, not very famous, and the rest in unvisited tombs. We often visit the tombs, the burial place of big men, famous people, but there are still people whose tombs are TOMBS, are unvisited. Still, we live a good life because of them. That's it. It's the novel. Ask your questions now. It's open for discussion now. I hope you got an idea of the whole story. It's a very fat novel. We find the story of Dorothea Brooke, how she's married to Casaubon. The marriage failed because she was idealistic in nature. She married the person believing that she was doing a very intellectual kind of work. But she is disillusioned, and in the meantime, the person died. And when he died, he wrote in the will to property, that if Dorothea would marry Ladislas, she has to uh, lose the property. But in the end of the story, we find that Dorothea, she had no interest in the property, and she developed love for Ladislas and married him. The second story is of Lydgate and Rosamond Vincy. Lydgate, a very idealistic doctor who visited or who came to live in the town of Middlemarch, he married Rosamond. And Rosamond, though beautiful, she was not a sensible lady. She was a spendthrift. She was leading a luxurious life. And Lydgate went deep into debt. And he had to borrow money from Bulstrode. And in the end, we find that the third story is of Bulstrode. Bulstrode was a middle-aged person, a merchant who was quite famous in Middlemarch. But we found that he had also a story. He was hiding a story, a past crime in a way. And the person Ruffle, a person called Ruffle, was blackmailing him. And in the end, towards the end of the story, that Ruffles died. And people suspected that Bulstrode and Lydgate had hand in his death. So both had to leave Middlemarch, Bulstrode and Lydgate along with his wife. So the three stories, they merged together. And this Ladislas who married Dorothea, he was the real owner of the property of Bulstrode. So this was the story. I hope you have got an idea of the story. And when we discuss the questions, you can find out that you have to discuss about money here, about the characters of Dorothea, character of Lydgate, character of Casaubon are important. Also, you can discuss the relationship between Dorothea and Casaubon. Then we have also the social, how the society, the Victorian society has been portrayed in Middlemarch. That can be another question. The portrayal of women in general, the women's question. We have other things like, social critique in Middlemarch, how George Eliot, the social life, a changing Victorian society. Those things we have to discuss. And you have to prepare your questions and answers or your notes on these topics. I told you earlier also, the headings in those IGNOU materials, they are like the lump questions. Any question?
Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Yes. Yes.
From each blog coming one will come one question now.
From each book. From each book.
From each book come
Yes.
one question. No more than one question.
From each novel.
Yeah.
One book, one question. Not more than one question.
Okay.
And I told you in the beginning that broadly you prepare questions on characters, themes, and narrative techniques.
Okay, ma'am. And
Because in some of the novels, the narrative technique is very, very important.
Yes, ma'am. And in unit 2, you told that after the prime of Miss Brooke, after you are saying something, I not listened properly. The second point. After the prime of Miss Brooke.
Yes, I asked you certain questions. So you find here in the IGNOU material some
maybe the word them.
Punchline kind of. The prime of Miss Brooke, which is character sketch of Dorothea.
Yes.
It is character sketch of Dorothea. In
After
Unit
that,
2,
ma'am.
you get themes of Middlemarch.
Yes.
After that, the unsuitable suitor. Unsuitable
And
suitor. Suitor means one who approached somebody for marriage. So
the
Cassiopeian
wall band
approached Dorothea for marriage and he was unsuitable for Dorothea. He
and the
was
wall band
unsuitable for Dorothea.
and then the wall band is
The word,
one is beyond.
I didn't get you. Can you repeat
The
please?
the world beyond.
The
There is
word beyond.
beyond given here
The
in
word
paragraph
beyond.
beyond.
Second, the
Yes.
word beyond. I have not got the material with me now. Just
Okay, ma'am.
I
Okay.
don't know where the word beyond is. After that, the outsider is there. The outsider is Lydgate because he came from outside to live in Middlemarch. The
Okay.
outsider. Then we find the angel of light. The angel of
And
light is
and
a
and, and
title.
before the outsider, ma'am, you are saying something before the outsider.
Before the outsider is that unsuitable suitor. That
Unsuitable
Cassiopeian
city.
who was writing, yes, he was unsuitable for Dorothea. He was not suitable for Dorothea. That's why. All these
Okay.
are titles, the headings. The headings are
Okay.
suggestive. They are
Okay.
meaningful. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All these
Thank
headings
you.
are meaningful. Well,
Thank you, ma'am.
for example, the angel of light. Ladisla becomes an angel of light in the life of Dorothea. Or a matter of money. Bulstrode. It explains the character of Bulstrode. Then we read Recalling Plato, how Middlemarch has recalled, has remembered Plato and his concept of mimesis and diegesis. Diegesis are dialogues and mimesis means imitation. Anything else?
Ma'am,
Yes?
Gothic means
Gothic means we discussed Gothic novels in the previous classes. We don't find many elements of Gothic here, but Gothic associated with the Middle Ages means Gothic fiction. The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole is a famous name in that particular genre of fiction. Gothic means the certain qualities are associated with Gothic fiction, like old castles. It's like horror story in a way. I will advise you to, as I know that you are from different backgrounds. Many students are from different backgrounds, not necessarily they had English honors. So, when you are reading English literature, it is very necessary that you read two books. One is a history of English literature. You must read a history of English literature. Any book would do, like by Allens and other people. But nowadays, people, the most popular is that history of English literature by Chaudhary and Goswami. A history of English literature book by Chaudhary and Goswami.
Which,
I
which,
told you that while
which
reading Chaudhary and Goswami, a history of English literature by Chaudhary and Goswami, published by Orient Black Swan. So when we read a particular novel or a drama or any other work, we have to see the name of the author and we
which
have to
Chaudhary,
know
ma'am?
something about the
Name?
author. And
Name? Which Chaudhary?
I don't remember the full name, but if you say Chaudhary and Goswami,
Okay, ma'am.
you can just search Chaudhary and Goswami. It is
Okay.
available in all the bookshops.
Okay.
A history of English literature by Chaudhary and Goswami. So, because when you read a particular work, even a poem or a drama or a novel, you have to go to the background of the period. So, you can get it from history of English literature. You also need to know something about the author so that we can view a particular work in a context. For that, we have to read history of English literature.
Hello, ma'am. Is it audible?
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Okay. Suddenly I was
Yes, ma'am.
disconnected. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Suddenly I was disconnected. So we were talking about different literary terms. We were talking about literary terms. You download a glossary of English literary terms by M. H. Abrams. Write it, note it down. M. H. Abrams, 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 M. H. Abrams, a glossary of English literary terms. 7th edition is available on the net. You just search on the net M. H. Abrams, a glossary of literary terms, PDF. You'll get a copy of the book from the internet. There you will find everything. There you will find the definition of everything in dictionary order, so that it will be easy for you to search things. For example, this Gothic novel, you go to G, all the means keywords are in dictionary order. You go to G and search Gothic novels. You'll get the meaning of Gothic novel, what are the features of it, what are the significant works in the journal. Then you will also get the names of some reference books. It will be easy for you to know things. So I suggested you to do two things. One is to read a history of English literature thoroughly. You can buy Goswami and Chaudhary for that. If you don't want to buy, suppose, still you can get it from the internet. Allen's, Albert. A history of English literature by Albert. You can get a copy of it from the net. A history of English literature by Albert. Also download Glossary of English Literary Terms by M. H. Abrams. Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes. Continue with your questions, please.
In this novel, what is the
Yes.
plot and what is the themes of this story?
What is the
Plot and themes. They are the different thing, no? So in this novel,
themes? Okay,
yes, what is
themes.
the theme?
Themes we discussed. Themes we discussed. Discussed the themes of first theme is a study of provincial life. A study of provincial life. Then we discussed about the theme of vocation, profession. Then theme of marriage is important here. Marital compatibility. Okay, that is in your unit 2. Unit 2. You will get a list of themes. Also money and pecuniary interest is a theme here. Birth, rank and class are themes here. Or the society of the period. The birth, rank and class. But when science is a theme here, how the advent of science, medical science, religion is a theme in the book, and egotism. Okay. Egotism in the sense how the character of Rosamond, Lydgate and Dorothea are motivated by a singular trait or quality in their character. They cling to a particular trait or quality obsessively. And it's a form of self-centeredness which fails to see the relation between the society and the individual. This is about theme, but when we speak of the plot of Middlemarch, when we speak about the plot of Middlemarch, it's about the narrative structure. Here comes the story of Dorothea and Casaubon and Ladislaw, is one plot. The story of Dorothea, Casaubon and Ladislaw is one plot. The story of Rosamond and Lydgate is another plot. Then the story of Bulstrode is another plot. And all these plots, they merge together. They merge together and they make a coherent plot in the novel. When we speak of plot, that is like beginning of story, taking the story to the climax, then anti-climax and the resolution in the end. When we speak of plot, theme is another thing. Themes are subjects dealt with in a particular, or the issues, the problems, the subjects which are dealt with in a particular work or a book. But when we speak of plot, it is something different. It's the beginning, setting a story, carrying it forward, then with the narrative structure, then going to the climax of the story, then the anti-climax, and finally the resolution to the whole story. So when we speak of plot, it's the, yes? Did you understand? Yes, did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Welcome. Some network issues have developed, I think. Is any other question? Any other question?
No, ma'am.
Okay, shall we stop today? Okay, let's stop today. In the next class, we will discuss the next block. Read the story if you can. Did you understand or did you get an overall idea of Middlemarch today?
Yes.
Did you, all of you?